Growing up, we ate everything. I always ate a lot of different things, and one of the things that I actually liked the flavor of was bacon. Now, bacon has that salty umami thing going on with the fat from it and the sort of the crispiness. It has a certain textural element that I really like. And as I got older, I stopped eating bacon just as a matter of course. It's really not that healthy for you, not that good for you. But I still liked it, so I would sneak a piece once in a while. And that was always kind of nice. Just had that certain sort of thing. But with all the nitrates and nitrites in it, it really wasn't the right thing to be eating. And then as we went vegetarian, I'm like, man, the once in a while kind of sneaking out and having a little piece of bacon to go with my eggs or having a BLT for that matter, kind of miss that. So I've been looking for a recipe to kind of help fill in that concept and get something else that's good. So what I came up with was sort of an eggplant bacon that's really pretty good. It's not bacon, I know it's not bacon, but it gives me that mouthfeel and it's sort of that crunch and the saltiness and the sort of the tanginess, and it works well with like eggs, and it works well as a sandwich where you put, so you make a nice sandwich of it, a little lettuce, tomato, maybe a little avocado and a little toast. It's really good and it gives you that sort of flavor that you want. So what I want to take you through now is making some of this eggplant bacon so you can see how it comes together. And like I said, it's not bacon, but it really does sort of give you that mouthfeel and makes me feel good. And it's actually kind of healthy, so not so bad for me. And I actually kind of enjoy that. Now it takes a little time and it's, it makes a fair amount. Of course, the first step is to work with some eggplant. Now, I like the Japanese eggplant. I think it has a little tastiness to it. I think it's a little more flavorful and doesn't have the same sort of seeds in it. So for me, I don't feel the same sort of tongue allergy that I have to the Italian or American eggplant. So these work really well. So I'm going to go ahead and just slice these up into slices. All I want to do is just put some slices together and I'm going to put them into a strainer. I'll show you why in just a minute. But I'll go ahead and just slice them up into strips. And you can make the strips as long or as short as you want. I like them to be about this length. It's a couple inches long. So I'm going to put them into my colander here that I have in the sink. And what I'm going to do is add a little salt to it. I want to draw out some of the moisture from the eggplant before I start to cook it. So it's kind of important to just get some salt on it. So I just salt it liberally, mix the salt up onto the eggplant, and then just let it sit for about half an hour, 45 minutes. I could let it sit for a little longer, but that's probably enough time. So while the moisture comes out of it, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start building a marinade to sit with my eggplant. And the marinade is going to have some tanginess. It's going to more closely emulate what I think of when I have bacon. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put together some brown sugar, and then I'm going to add a few other ingredients to kind of get this started here. Because I want to make this somewhat of a liquid, I'm going to add a little bit of water just to kind of thin it out a little bit, so that way the sugar starts to dissolve. I think it's kind of important to put it that way. Then I'm going to go ahead and put a few other ingredients in here as I go through it. I'm going to add a little bit of apple cider vinegar. I think that gives it a little bit of tanginess. It kind of works well in the mouth. So I'll use a little bit of that in there. And then I'm going to add a couple of other things. Next up is a little bit of olive oil that I'll put in, just to give it a little bit of that sort of nature of feeling a little bit fatty in a way. You could use a different oil if you like, but I like olive oil. It kind of works well in here. Certainly coconut oil is a good choice. It works well in a lot of vegetarian dishes because it gives it a lot of fattiness that feels kind of nice on the tongue, but that's basically what I want. So I'll go ahead and now I'm going to add some spices to kind of round it out a little more. So I'm going to use, actually a little soy sauce is good because it just gives it that saltiness. You want to have a little saltiness to feel like it's something like bacon, because bacon, one of the key characteristics is it has a saltiness to it. And then the other spices I'm going to use a little bit of chipotle, because I think chipotle just gives it a little tang. That's a little different than bacon, but I think it just adds something that makes it kind of nice. And then the last ingredient I'm going to use is some smoked paprika. I think the smoked paprika is really nice because it adds a smokiness and a little bit of a zip to it. It just makes it a little bit better. So I'll use a little bit of the smoked paprika to kind of get it started here and give it a lot of flavor. So those are my ingredients for my marinade. As I get my marinade sitting and just kind of sitting together, I'm going to let it sit for a couple of minutes while I wait for my eggplant to be ready. So once my eggplant is ready, I'm going to go ahead and just mix this up a little bit and make sure that it's all mixed up, so especially the sugar isn't sticking to the sides or whatever. I like to use a plastic bag for this because it's really easy and I can lay it down and move it around a lot, so it's a nice way to work with it. So once my eggplant is basically dried out a little bit, I've taken some of the moisture out of it, I'm going to go ahead and just take my eggplant and rinse it off. I'm just going to kind of pick off a little bit of the salt. You can see it's a little bit softer here. And then I'll just rinse it off. I'll just spread it around a little bit to get the rest of the salt off. I don't want it to be too salty, but a little salty flavor is okay. So I'll go ahead and just mix it around under the running water for just a moment or two, and then I can get started putting it in my marinade. This is pretty easy. All I'm going to do is just take my eggplant off, put it in the bag with the marinade, and then let it sit for about an hour at a minimum. You could certainly let it sit overnight if you want to have it the next morning. That works pretty well too. But I'm going to go ahead and just put them all in there with the marinade and just let them sit for a while. I want to coat them all completely, let them absorb a little bit of the liquid that's in here, and kind of get that flavor going a little bit. It's just kind of nice to be able to do this. Now, as I said before in some of the other recipes I've made, feel free to adjust as you see fit. If you want a little less spice, try something else. If you want a little more umami, try something else that way too. You could certainly use some mushroom flavoring to kind of get a little more umami out of these eggplant. You could use a little more soy sauce to get a little more saltiness. Like I said, coconut oil might work. You could certainly drop off some of the other spices if you want to. Add a little liquid smoke or put these on a smoker. That might be really good if you really want to get something good going. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and mix them up, and I'm going to put them in my refrigerator for about a couple of hours. Now, I like to let them sit for a while. I'll rotate them once or twice just to make sure the marinade is completely covering them. But once it's ready, I'm going to go ahead and take it out. And you can see here I've got a wire rack that I've set on top of some foil. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to take each of these pieces of eggplant and lay them on there so that they'll be laid out on the rack so they get fully convected with the heat that's going to go completely around them. We'll cook them through. So I'll just lay them on here. It takes just a couple of minutes to lay them on, and I'm going to go ahead and get my oven ready at about 350 degrees. So I just lay them out until I've got all my pieces of eggplant. I'll get all of them, both of the eggplants, onto this wire rack. It's perfect for this. So once they're all laid on, I can just make sure that they've got a little room to breathe. They're going to get heat from underneath, they're going to get heat from on top, and they'll cook up in the oven. Now, the reason I put it at about 350, I wanted that sort of medium range, so it will dry them out a little bit and make them kind of crispy. So I'm going to go ahead and just stick these in the oven, and they're going to go in for about an hour, maybe a little longer, but right around there somewhere. And they're great, because what's going to happen is they're going to dry up a little bit, and they're going to get just a little bit crispy, so they'll taste a little bit more like bacon in terms of texture. So I'll just go ahead and put them in the oven and let it cook, and that's it. That's really all there is to this dish. It's just a little time consuming because it takes a while to make them. And when you look at it, it doesn't look like it made that much, but yet it made a fair amount. It takes me a couple of days to eat all this up. So once it's done, I pull them out and they look like this. Now they look something like bacon. I know it's not exactly like bacon, but here you've got something that's got a little texture to it. In fact, as I pick one of these up in a second, you'll see that it actually kind of has a firmness to it. And what you'll notice is if you leave them out on a counter, they'll start to soften a little bit. If you put them in a bag, they'll change their texture a little bit, but you can always throw them back in the oven if you want to reheat them. That's it. That's my vegetarian bacon.